Welcome, friends. Thanks for joining for another All Hands on Tech with your host, David Neal, Pluralsight Developer Advocate. I hope, thank you for joining, and I hope you're doing well. Today, we're kicking off a brand new series of streams. We're going to be building a Node.js based application that is a trivia game, a multiplayer, real-time trivia game that's similar to probably some of the online games that you've played in recent years to help pass away some of the time during the pandemic and to connect with folks. I started working on building a similar game system just to see what it was like. And today I'd like to start with a clean slate, brand new project using some technologies I know, some technologies that I don't. And we're going to kind of learn these together and discover some of these things together. My name is David Neal. I go by Reverent Geek on Twitter and Instagram and Twitch and YouTube. You can find me in any of those places as Reverent Geek. You can also check out my website, reverentgeek.com. These sessions will be broadcast over LinkedIn and Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook over the Pluralsight's communities. And if you ever need to go back and rewatch one of these streams, you can find them archived on Pluralsight's YouTube channel. So to give you an idea, what we're going to do is we're going to build a brand new application from scratch using Node.js. I'm going to use a framework that I haven't used before called Fastify, which is supposed to be one of the fastest, if not, arguably the fastest framework for Node.js. And we're going to use Socket.io to do real-time communications between the server and each of the clients being, web browsers or mobile phones, to play a multiplayer trivia game. It'll be a timed game, say 30 seconds or 60 seconds, where each person tries to answer as many trivia questions as possible, and the person who gets the most right wins. And, there's so many parts and pieces to building something like this. We're going to start by building the back-end server with Node.js, and then over time we'll start to introduce some UI, and we'll use things like Tailwind and probably Vue as the front-end framework. Who knows what technologies we may end up getting into, to maybe some kind of storage to store the results and the leaderboard scores, and some kind of database perhaps. And that could be a relational database, or it could be a document database. All of that's to be seen, and hopefully you'll be learning some stuff along the way, and maybe you'll ask questions. I hope you'll engage and let me know what you're interested in, and maybe you can help decide which technologies we're going to do. Question comes in from Facebook: are you using multiple screens for these applications to create this, or do you look at one at a time? As we start to build the app, of course, I'm going to be streaming with one screen. I can switch over to my desktop, and we can look at the code and look at the application as we're building it. As we build the application, we'll use multiple browser windows to test and simulate like multiple people playing the game at the same time, so that we can see, the WebSocket in action with multiple uh, connections. Somewhere down the road, we may want to host this app somewhere so that we can all test it together. That would be real cool to have folks on the stream also helping test the application as we build it. And that's somewhere down the road. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But that would be a really cool thing to do over a stream, is we play the game that we built, right? That would be awesome. All right. We've got a few folks that have joined the stream. I'm going to switch over to my desktop. I'll turn on me in the corner so you can still see me. I'm going to turn off the banner at the bottom. Yeah, it would be pretty awesome we get that working. Maybe not today, but we'll definitely work towards that goal over the next coming weeks to and again, this stream that I'm hosting on building stuff with Node.js and JavaScript, I'm doing these every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. That's 11 a.m. Pacific and so forth. So wherever you are in the world, this is the time of day I'm going to be doing these streams. We're going to stream for an hour at a time each time. And if things go well, maybe we'll spin up another day and time to work on this stuff together. All right. So I've got my terminal up here. I'm using iTerm 2 on Mac OS. You can, if you want to follow along and build this on your local machine at the same time, you can use whatever terminal and editor and so forth that you're comfortable with. This should work on any operating system. Assuming you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux, you should be able to accomplish everything that we're doing here on any of those operating systems. That's the power of Node.js and a lot of the technologies that we're going to use. They're cross-platform. So I'm in a folder right now under my projects. I'm going to create a brand new folder. Let's call it, what do we call it? Let's say, let's just call it trivia game for now. We may want to think of an exciting name. One of the hardest problems in computer science. What do you name things? Right? So I'm going to create a new folder. Nothing in it right now. And let's say, so one thing you need to know, if you're going to work on this yourself, you need some version of Node.js installed. So if I type node-v, I get version 16.17.1. If you don't already have Node.js installed and you want to work on this yourself, the easiest thing to do is to go to nodejs.org. Let me bring that up on my computer as well. And you're presented with a couple of downloads depending on your operating system. The long-term server, or LTS, is the current stable version, and that's the one that I always recommend. Whatever is currently LTS is what you should be using to build your production applications. The current, which is now 18.10 as of right now, it is the future version of Node.js. It's got some experimental branches in it, some experimental code, and it's great for trying out new Node.js features that are coming down the pipeline, and be able to kind of look a little bit forward. Now, if you're not already familiar with the Node.js ecosystem, there is a yearly cadence that each year the new version or the current version of Node.js becomes the LTS, and that's going to happen soon. October, I believe, is the time of year that the current version becomes the new LTS. So in another month, version 18 will be the LTS, or the long-term support version, and then the Node.js committee will create version 19 as a stepping stone to the next major release of version 20. Just to give you a little bit of background on how the Node.js system works. So you can download it here. If you're running on Linux, Mac, or if you're using the Linux subsystem on Windows, I highly recommend that you get NVM. NVM is the Node version manager, and it allows you to install and be able to switch between multiple versions of Node. It makes it really easy to maintain your version of Node. So if I go here to my terminal and I type NVM ls, which is list, I can see that I've got installed on my system 16.17.1 and 18.9.1. Now, 18.9.1 is not the most recent version of 18. So if I type ls-remote 18, it'll list all the versions of Node that are available, all the versions of 18 that are available to install. And I can use NVM install 18. And I always use this trick: reinstall packages from, using the last version that I have installed. So now it will download version 18 and install that. And, I'm doing this just as an example. I'm not going to use version 18. I just went through all that to explain how, we should be using version 16, but I'm showing you NVM so that what that looks like and what the install process looks like when you're using NVM. Highly recommend it. Hopefully this will be done in another minute. My computer has been acting a little bit sluggish for the last few days. I'm not sure what's going on there. There we go. Almost done. There we go. So I can use NVM use16 to make sure that I'm using version 16. Yeah. Casey says time to defrag and clean up some files. Well, solid state drives, I don't know that defragging is as useful as it used to be. It's been a while since I've done any kind of defragging, but cleanup is probably in order. All right, we got our folder. We've got Node.js installed. The first thing you need to do is to type npm init, and it's going to ask you a bunch of questions. If you're already familiar with the questions, you can kind of just do it all in one shot using -y, and that just means it'll answer yes to all the questions that pop up. But for now, this will ask me, what's the package name? And the default is the name of the folder, trivia-game. We'll leave it at that. Version 1.0, that's fine. Description, multiplayer real-time game built with Node.js. Entry point, index.js. I know that the way I like to structure the source code for any Node.js project is I like to put the source code for the server and all those related system files in a separate folder called source. And I put, structure my project so that I got like source, build, tests, a bunch of different folders at that top level. So I don't put source code at the top level. So I'm going to specify that the entry point is source/index.js. Test command, I'm not going to be building any tests just yet. Git repository, that'll come later. When we get done with however far we get today, I'll create a new repository and store this project. Keywords, Node.js. I know we're going to use game. We're going to use Fastify. We're going to use Socket.io. Author, that'll be me. And hopefully some of you, if you contribute to the project as well, you can be listed as an author. License, MISC. I like to default to MIT. And now it's confirming. Does this look okay? Yes. And so what this has done is it has created a package.json file in our, all those steps was just to build a JSON file. And this is where our dependencies are stored and any kind of script commands and other things that are related to our project, metadata, so forth. So I'm going to use code period, which is the current directory, to open up Visual Studio Code, which is my favorite editor for Node.js projects. And we have our one package.json. Now, what I just did, I typed a command at the command line, code space period, and the editor opened up for that folder. If that doesn't work for you, then here's another cool tip about using Visual Studio Code is if you open up the command palette, which is Command Shift P on Mac, or you can get to it under let's see, where is that? Under View, Command Palette, you can start typing command, and this one that shows up here, shell command, install code command in path. If you choose that or click it, it will install Visual Studio Code in your path so that you can use that code command anywhere inside a terminal or command prompt to launch Visual Studio Code. And you can specify the name of a folder or the name of a file, and it will launch with that in the editor. Really cool. First thing I do whenever I start a brand new Node.js project is I install ESLint and my own personal ESLint config settings. So we use npm to do that. That's the Node Package Manager. I'll type npm install ES, and I'm going to use --save -dev. So this is a developer dependency. It's not something we would deploy in a production environment. So these are developer dependencies, and we're looking for ESLint and ESLint config Reverent Geek, which is my personal take on ESLint rules I like to have for my projects. All right. So if we go back to Visual Studio Code and look at package JSON, we now see that we have 2 developer dependencies in our package, and there's also a package lock file that is keeping track of the different versions of dependencies that we have installed. And I know from using ESLint for years now that I need a ESLint config file. So ESLint rc.js, and I'm using the touch command to create that file. I could create that file inside Visual Studio Code as well, but I kind of like to use the command line whenever possible. Now, even though I've done this probably more than 100 times, I don't remember off the top of my head what goes in my ESLint rc.js file. It's something that I configured at the start of every project, and then I immediately forget about it and never look at it again. So here's another cool tip with using npm. You can type npm docs and then the name of any module, third-party module that you have installed or that's in the npm registry. So I can say npm docs ESLint config reverent geek, and that's going to launch my web browser and take me to the README file that's associated with that project. And I have in my README the different rule sets or different settings that I may want to put in my ESLint RC file. So I'm doing a Node project. This is the settings that I want. So I'll copy that and then go over to Visual Studio Code, open up this file, and save it. One thing you may notice is declaring use strict at the top. So I'm a little bit old school when it comes to building Node.js apps. I'm still using common.js, which is by far the most common or the most widely used. Some of the newer projects are starting to use ES modules or ESM, which means using the import export syntax. And that's great. We could do that in this project, but I'm not going to. I'm going to use just regular common.js modules. And by default, the older versions of Node and the common.js module system, strict mode is not turned on by default. Now, I don't remember off the top of my head all the reasons why you want to have strict mode enabled, but I've done the research enough times that it's a good thing. You should always have it enabled. So part of my ESLint rules is that if I don't put use strict at the top of a file, it's going to complain and give me an error. So it's one of my rules. I always want to have use strict turned on. Now, if you're using ES modules where you're using import and export instead of require to pull in other modules, strict mode is turned on by default. So it is automatically enabled. You don't have to specify. All right. I'm going to create a new folder called source and create a file in here called index.js. Put use strict at the top. And let's console log, hey y'all, run node and a period, which means it's telling Node.js to execute whatever the default file is in the package JSON. and we get hey y'all. So hello world application right there. If you've never built anything with Node.js before, hey, here's your first step. One of the things that you may have noticed as I was typing and as I was saving the file is that there's spaces. Say if I remove the spaces for the text, as soon as I press Command S to save that file, it puts those spaces back. That's because my personal ESLint rules include some syntax formatting. So I don't have to use another tool like Prettier or Prettify or some tool that's designed to reformat code. I have a lot of that baked into my ESLint rules so that every time I save a JavaScript file, it automatically formats any of those rules that I have put in place. I like to have spaces inside my parentheses, for example. I think it makes the code more readable. All right. So I made the decision to go ahead and we're going to explore building this application using Fastify. I've been hearing about Fastify for years now. I think it's gotten a pretty good share of the marketplace, you will, for lack of better terms. There's a lot of folks who are either using Fastify or who are interested in Fastify. I'm interested in Fastify. I want to see what it looks like to build an app with Fastify. So Fastify is what they call a fast and low overhead web framework for Node.js. It is highly focused on providing the best developer experience with the least overhead and a powerful plugin architecture inspired by Happy and Express. As far as we know, it is one of the fastest web frameworks in town. So, speed tests and, efficiency and all that stuff is kind of subjective. And it's always like, it depends on what you're trying to do. One framework might be faster than another. What I like about their statement is that the plugin architecture and everything is inspired by Happy and Express. So Express is the by far the most widely known and understood web framework for Node.js. It's kind of the default or the standard. It's been around from nearly the beginning of Node.js. It's just pretty much everywhere. But it is the design is a little bit outdated. And although I appreciate how it has continued to meet that need of building web applications, I want to try something different. Happy also happens to be a web framework that I have used quite a bit, and I really like it. I think it's an awesome alternative to using Express. It's a little bit more opinionated than Express, and I think I agree with the opinions that Happy has. So Fastify saying that they are inspired by Happy and Express, it was like, well, those are my two favorite frameworks for Node.js. So I'm now curious to see what good parts or things that they have been inspired by that have made their way into Fastify. Who's using Fastify? There's a lot of folks. Highly performant, extensible, schema-based, which is great. I think that's, they may be referring to Happy has this system called Joy that is used to validate incoming and outbound data, and it's very schema based. So that may be a one of the great ideas from Happy that they borrowed. Logging, and we chose the best logger to almost remove this cost, the Pinot, which I agree with that. I think Pinot is a fantastic logger for Node.js applications, so that's cool. Developer friendly and TypeScript ready. So I'm not going to use TypeScript, but it's good to know that they are maintaining support for TypeScript for Fastify. So if you want to use TypeScript, you absolutely can. So as I hoped, there's a quick start on their web page. Install it. Let's start with that. So we'll use npm install Fastify. Okay. And just to double check, we look at our package JSON. We now have 2 developer dependencies and 1 production dependency, Fastify. Okay. Now let's switch over to our code. And we don't want our console log anymore. Let's just take what they have here, copy and paste that in, save it, which is going to reformat it based on my ESLint rules. And let's take a look at what this is doing. So first, we are requiring in the Fastify module, and there is a function on Fastify that we are calling to I assume to initialize that framework, and we're specifying that logger is true. So must be turning on the internal logging system for Fastify. Next, we're declaring a route, the home page, if you will, the default route for the app is looking at returning a JSON, a small bit of JSON. So it's returning hello world, and then run the server. So we've got a start function that is an async function with a try catch in the middle, and we are waiting on Fastify to listen on port 3000. If there's an error, it's going to log an error using the logging framework that is built into Fastify, and then it's going to exit the process. And finally, as the last command, it runs start. So let's give it a whirl. So I should be able to use node space period, just as I did before. It started. It logged a couple of things to the console, listening on localhost port 3000. So if I go to the browser here and use localhost 3000, I get the JSON object returned that I would expect. It says hello world. And I also noticed that it logged some things to the console. It logged that a request, an incoming request to the URL / which is the home directory, and it returned status code 200. It also received a request for favicon.ico, which is kind of a standard thing that browsers do, is check to see if there's an icon associated with website. It did not, there's not one defined, or there's not a route defined to serve that. So it returned status code 404, as would be expected. So cool. We got a nice starting web server with Fastify. We could change this to anything we want. So I like, hey, y'all. So if we stop the server using Control-C and restart it and refresh the page, we get, hey, y'all. Very cool. Now, that reminds me, one of the first, I said earlier, the first thing I always do is install ESLint and my ESLint config rules. One of the other things that is usually near the first on the list is using something like NodeMon. NodeMon is a developer tool that will detect whenever you change a file in your project and automatically restart your server, which I think is very handy. You saw that every time we make a change to our project, we have to go to the terminal, type Control-C to stop the server from running, and then restart the server. Well, NodeMon, if we type npm install, use the save dev. Also, you can use -D, and that's the same thing as the -- save dev. I like to be explicit. Save dev NodeMon. And again, I'm going to use npm docs NodeMon to launch the default README for the project, just so I can check the documentation that I've got it set up right. So let's jump to the documentation, and we can use NodeMon. So I'm just gonna jump over here to the project, and inside package JSON, I'm going to create a script called dev, and it's going to run NodeMon source/index.js. I could also do just a period to run the default, and then I need to add a comma on the end of that to make it valid JSON. And now if I run npm run dev. So run is a command of npm that is going to execute one of the scripts that's defined in the package JSON, and dev is the name of the script that we just created. So it launched our application as we would expect. It's now running. I can come over here to this page, refresh it. I don't know why it's wanting to translate it. And yeah, we see that it is requesting it every time. And now, if I make a change to index.js, maybe add an exclamation point, we now see NodeMon restarting due to changes, starting node source index.js. And we come over here and refresh. We now see the exclamation point. So we didn't have to restart the server. NodeMon, somebody commented, NodeMon has a Caribbean vibe. Yeah, NodeMon. I think it stands for Node.js monitor, but I don't know. I like the Caribbean vibe too. NodeMon makes everything better mon. Cool. By the way, I didn't mention this earlier, but there's a request and a reply, and those have some red squigglies like there's something wrong here. The the thing that ESLint is complaining about is we're not using the request or the reply, and that's fine. We don't have to use those right now, but as part of the documentation, it's nice to know that there's a request and a reply object that we can use as part of fulfilling whatever our request is. Okay. Now I know the next thing, or one of the next things that we're going to start to use and play around with is Socket IO. Socket IO is a WebSocket framework for JavaScript, client side and server side, that allows us to do real time communications, have a socket open between the client and the server, and be able to send messages back and forth, be able to broadcast messages. So, broadcast messages to the server, or from the server to all the clients, or from a client to all the other clients that are connected on that socket, which is really cool. So let's go take a look at Socket IO. There's a get started and documentation. I know from just doing a quick bit of research earlier that there is a Fastify module uh, for making it a little bit easier to add Socket IO to a Fastify app. I think we still have to install the Socket IO dependency. Um, let's take a look at the documentation here. So the example that they have assumes that you're using Express. This is the kind of thing I run into all the time with building Node.js. Is Express is so widely used that it's kind of like the standard, and what just about any kind of documentation is going to include, well, this is how you set it up with Express, which is great. But in our case, we're not using Express. We want to use Fastify. So some of the documentation might not be so easy to understand or to follow along to, see that Socket IO is working like it's supposed to. I'm going to skip all this Express stuff and come down here and get to the part where it's talking about using Socket IO. So Socket.io is the name of the module that we need to install. And I'm going to search for Socket.io Fastify. And there is there's a Fastify Socket.io package that we'll probably use. I wonder what this is. Oh, so they have an example of Fastify on the Socket.io website. That's really great. So it's using the Fastify Socket.io plugin. So let's install that. Fastify Socket.io. I think that's the same plugin that this is referring to. So let's open that one up too. So it's good to know that you need to install both Fastify Socket.io and Socket.io. So there's an example here. Let's see what this example has. So Fastify.io, let's copy that. So after we import Fastify, let's require in Fastify IO. It creates a server. Let's see, how does that compare with what? That must be what this is. So this is in one line, it's creating, it's requiring Fastify and it's creating the server. So this object that we have called Fastify is actually server in this example. So this is the library, this is the server, and here in our code, we're doing it in one step. We're requiring in Fastify and we're creating a server at the same time. So server.register Fastify IO. So to do the same thing in our code, we're going to say Fastify register Fastify IO. Register the socket IO plugin. Okay. And then in their example, they have a server.io.emit. Hello. So here where we have return, hey y'all, we can also include fastify.io.emit. Remember, the Fastify that's in our code is the same as server in the other example. And then they also have a server when ready. Fastify ready, then fastify.io on connection, and then do something with the connection. Let's say fastify dot log, I think. Yeah, log dot. And I don't know. I assume there's probably a log.info. I want to log something to the command line, but for now, we'll just use console.log and we'll look this up in just a minute. So console.log, socket connection made. All right. This is not going to do anything yet, but hopefully if we run npm run dev, it's listening on port whatever. We come over here to our page and refresh. We got a socket, or we got a request complete, but we didn't get any socket information. So wonder, io.emit. That's what we've got. one thing I know we're going to want to do is to, uh, we need to um, serve some HTML, not just JSON. If all we were building was an API, we could create routes and return JSON however much we needed to. But this app that we're building, this game app, is also needs to be able to serve HTML to the browser for the game client, for the game front end. And so we need to do that with Fastify, and then we need to have sockets enabled where that client can then communicate back and forth with the server, which may exist on the same path, or it may be a different route. Um, so there's this Fastify static module that is used to serve HTML. So path is a built-in Node.js library used to uh, look at directories and file name paths. And I'm going to install this Fastify static plugin. Let's do that here. Whoops. npm install Fastify static. I need to register that plugin. And instead of requiring it here, I'll use the Fastify static that we have declared up here. And we can use a public, let's see, const. So underscore dir name is a special global um, oh, I'm doing this in the wrong spot. Underscore dir name is a special global variable inside Node.js that specifies the current directory of the project. And now, or where this application is being executed. I can never remember off the top of my head if underscore dir name is pointing to the top level folder of trivia game, or if it's pointing to the source folder where this index.js file resides. So I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So I'm going to console log this public path. Just so I know I'm doing the right thing. And let's see, the root is public path we're going to just use the root as the prefix. I'm going to create a folder called public. And let's just say index.html. Hey, y'all. And yeah, I'm not sure that this is going to work. I'm not familiar with Fastify, but let's see what happens. May have to run dev. But come over here to our local host and refresh. We still get the hey y'all, but if we specify index.html, then we get our static file. So that's working. So somehow we've got to make the server socket connection whenever the HTML page is emitted. So I think instead of returning JSON here, we need to return our HTML file and, from this route and emit the socket. There's a client-side socket library that we have to have on that HTML page that is making that connection back to the server. I think that's the piece that we're missing, if I recall correctly. So we've got to have the client on the page so that it can talk back to the server. All right, so we're almost at time. Kunal says on LinkedIn, it's so satisfying to watch a master copy code, reverse engineering, and tailor to requirements like literally any other developer. I'm actually crying with happiness right now. Hey, I've been programming for a long time, as you can tell, and there is no shame at all in copying code, as long as as I've talked through how to translate what what we see in the documentation to what we're doing inside our project. As long as you can make that jump from, this is the code we need, but I also need to translate it at the same time to make it work. To understand how it works in the context of what we're doing. That's the key, and that's where we get bit so many times when things don't work like we expect them to. It's usually in not fully understanding how to apply some of the stuff that we're finding on Stack Overflow or one of the so many other useful places. We didn't get quite as far as I hoped we would in this first hour, but we got a starting point. I will commit this code to a repository, and next time we get together, we'll start from that point, and I'll share the GitHub repository and make sure everyone can have an opportunity to also play along with the project. If you have any questions or run into any issues or want to chat with me about anything, I am Reverend Geek on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and everywhere. ReverendGeek.com is my website, and David at ReverendGeek.com is how you can contact me on email. Again, these are going to be on LinkedIn and YouTube, Twitch, and Pluralsight's Facebook. If you want to go back and watch any of this stuff again, you can definitely find it on Pluralsight's YouTube channel. And yes, this is recorded. You are so welcome. You'll find it on Pluralsight's YouTube channel, and we'll get together again next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, or wherever it is that you are in the world. I'd love to hear your feedback if there's things that you're learning out of these series, or if you have any questions at all, I'd be glad to help you. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are, and I hope to see you again on the next All Hands on Tech with your host, David Neal.